That would be that would be good. And if I can post it up there afterwards, that's good. So so with that in mind, let's kick it off. So there are several folks who wanted to couldn't be here but wanted to see this, so I'm recording it for that. So Ricardo, maybe you can sort of give us a bit of background, but I think this came out of the discussion last week about the fact that you have been working on things like the Open Trip Planner and integrating the FIWARE, and I know you've had a couple of discussions with the FIWARE folks this week as well, and so there's a fair bit of interest, I think, in what you've done, and so thanks for offering to give the presentation.
No worries. It's my pleasure, and I hope it matches the expectations. And if anything comes up, even afterwards, feel free to reach us, and we'll try to respond as best as we can. So, so to give a little bit of background, I work at Ubiwhere. Ubiwhere is a Portuguese SME. I don't know if you're able to see my screen changing. So now I have a white slide saying.
Yep, it's coming up just fine.
Great, good. So basically, we are some of you know us. We are a Portuguese SME, 11 years old. We'll be 12 years old this September, and we focus on research and innovation projects and creating smart city solutions for telecom, future internet, and also new technology. So we are based in the lovely city of Aveiro. It's a very nice city close to the Atlantic Ocean. So whenever you come to Portugal, either through Lisbon, Faro, or Aveiro. Well, Faro is a bit further, but in any case, it's close enough to pop up and give us a visit. We are more than happy to welcome you to our lovely offices. So we work with smart cities. Actually, I am the Smart Cities Research and Innovation Manager at Ubiwhere. So we try to create a more sustainable world. That means that we try to provide technology that helps us improving mobility efficiency, resources consumption, reducing the impact on the environment, and all the sectors that this involves. So meaning that it will affect also the energy consumption, the tourism services, and so on. The company was actually created on the telecom side, so it started doing some quality of service and quality of experience services for telecom operators. And that gave us quite a good background on data analysis, and that's what we brought to the smart cities domain. So we kind of like to get the grips on big data sets and try to solve a specific challenge, and that's what we try to do. And of course, we need to keep up with the rest of the innovation that other communities create and that we as humankind like to create. So we try to follow up on space technology, blockchains, and artificial intelligence, other things that are now starting to become more and more disruptive. So we do not work by ourselves, so we like to partner with several entities and organizations. Some of them are municipalities, government regions, standardization bodies, and industry players, but also universities and research centers, so that we can align our innovation potential and the exploitation of the solutions with their research capabilities, and making sure that what they want to research on the labs can be brought and create an impact on society. And this is also part of why we have such a good relationship with FIWARE and other initiatives, because in order to make them available in the world, we need to make sure that we follow the open standards, interoperability. We have all of this in mind. So this is just the context around Ubiwhere. We have plenty of more things to say, but I will not bother you today with that. So I will go straight to the point. You have my email address, and Wilfred can put you in contact with me if needed. But I'll make sure that I can respond. Because today I wanted to talk about what we do with the city of Porto, concretely for the project Synchronicity. And this might be familiar to you because it's kind of a huge project funded by the European Commission. It started in 2017, so it will end December this year. 3 years of development that tries to create the single digital market for smart cities and communities. And it's called IoT large-scale pilots because it's the Commission strategy of creating large-scale deployments of IoT platforms and IoT devices in different sectors, and Synchronicity was the one funded for the smart cities and communities domain. And the major outcome or the major ambition is to deliver a market for urban services powered by IoT devices and platforms for Europe and beyond. We have around dozens of cities that are deploying solutions, so we call them the reference zones. We are working as a technological partner of the city of Porto, but there are other smart cities following up on the reference architecture, the deployment, the use case, and so on. Some of them are already very well known as smart cities, like Santander, Helsinki, Antwerp, Eindhoven, and others as well. Manchester is also very famous. Carouge in the Switzerland and Milan in Italy are also very active in the smart city domains. But our role is concretely with the city of Porto, and that's what I will try to showcase here today. There are other cities following up. Actually, Portland is one of them, but I'm not fully aware of the whole ecosystem and how they are linking, but at least they are aware through the Open and Agile Smart Cities initiative and the powerful dissemination activities from the project of what we are doing here. In any case, it's good to know that we can also go to South Korea, which are always as well following the activities. So in the end, we want to provide a robust model for standards-based innovation in procurement based on IoT devices and services across multiple domains. So the overall concept behind the project was having this reference architecture that smart cities could follow as guidelines. So the project started to define this set of logical components and functionalities that basically enable any city to become part of the smart city digital single market, meaning that they would follow the guidelines for the software architecture, doing also a use case analysis, meaning that they could replicate what other cities were doing under the same domain. But basically, this is being done through different reference zones, meaning that the reference architecture is actually leveraging on what the different cities that I've mentioned before had already in place as a technical baseline. So I'll show you in the meantime that the multi-model concept require different types of challenges and services for different cities. Porto had their own challenges, which were different from Santander and so on. And the idea here is to reuse existing approaches, so not reinvent the wheel. The idea is to basically bring in the outcomes from different European initiatives through platforms and projects, and actually bring in what the common things happen. That's a thing that FIWARE also promotes, but the framework from Synchronicity is also promoting here, which ultimately led to the principles of Open and Agile Smart Cities. Open and Agile Smart Cities is a network of smart cities with more than 200 cities, if I recall correctly, and it's a non-profit association which tries to bring in the supply and the demand together and share their experiences and share these principles. And the principles that they have come up with through Synchronicity is that this common digital single market requires a minimum interoperability mechanisms, which if we look at the complex architecture, I believe that has been shared here in other sessions before. The minimal interoperability points are focusing on these three points. So the common context management APIs that basically allows to provide interoperability with existing data sources and IoT platforms. So collecting the data from the city through standard and open APIs, and the commonalities that were found in other projects have then become shared data models, meaning that regardless of the data source and the communication protocol and whatever system is collecting the data or providing the data, then it becomes harmonized to the same data model. And then on the top hand, you'll have different APIs with different functionalities for context management for data exchange, marketplace for, well, I have this detail here. So basically context management for real-time access to context information from the different cities. And the shared data models, as I mentioned, following guidelines and a catalog of common data models for different verticals, which allow the interoperability between different systems and different applications and different cities. The marketplace, which is the major outcome, so it basically provides functionalities like the catalog of services, service level agreements, license management, basically a marketplace of hardware and services for smart cities and communities. And also, of course, the security and data storage, which allows to basically authenticate users and applications, and also allows access to historical data, because the context management one only focuses on the real time and does not store any historical. Sorry?
Ricardo, can I ask a couple of questions?
Yeah, sure.
First of all, is the code, it's part of FIWARE, and I realize FIWARE is open. Is the Synchronicity project also open code?
Yeah, I was about to get there. So basically, all the resources that Synchronicity is producing are openly available. So we have on GitLab.com all this open source code that was produced during the project, but also the APIs, even the documentation and specification is also available for people to study and try them out before testing out the open source code.
That's great. So we can go out there and play with things and learn that way as well.
Yes. Yes.
The other question was, what is the data model from the perspective of sort of centralized versus distributed? Probably the functionality is the easiest way to describe this. If I work in Portland, and Portland creates a set of smart city services related to Portland, and I'm a citizen in Portland, and then I get on a plane and I fly to Porto, is my persona sufficient that those services would recognize me and customize to me when I arrive in Porto, or is my identity primarily associated with Portland?
That's a very nice question. I forgot to mention that I have here with me my colleague Francisco on the call, because he's actually the technical person more into the project. In any case, we will try to answer it now. So, Francisco, if you have any insights.
First of all, hi, nice to meet you.
Hi.
So yeah, regarding your question, I think it's mostly around federation, right? So the thing is about synchronicity, or even FIWARE in general, but for synchronicity, there wasn't any specific work about. I mean, there was work about having a federated environment, so that you could have, for instance, having a single identity that would allow you to access all the data, for instance, be it from the city of Porto or the city of Antwerp, whatever. But it's, I would say, it's an ongoing work. So right now, the answer to your question would be no, I guess.
But it's not excluded from the framing.
No, not at all. No. It's something that is, yeah, it's a very good question. And yeah, it's something that is being worked upon. Yeah, definitely.
Thank you. Excellent.
So basically, yeah, as I was mentioning before, all this information is open source and openly available. In the end of the slides, I'll have the different links to the different sections of websites and where you can find information, because I can understand that sometimes it might become a bit overwhelming to find the right piece of information. So as mentioned before, the different cities and all of this ecosystem created through the project ended up with three different use cases to showcase that the framework that we created could solve different challenges in a single city, and also replicating it through other cities. And the three use cases which were not exclusive, or, I mean, which were not uniquely responsible for. What I would say is that the city would not need to run the three use cases, but they would actually provide the requirements and choose which ones they wanted to solve. And in the case of Porto, they are solving the multimodal transportation one and the community policy suite. So basically to solve those different challenges. And that approach came because the city of Porto had already a technical baseline in place. They had already some FIWARE generic enablers assembled that collected data, some data from the IoT devices and existing systems. Other cities had their own platform. Santander was also quite upfront with the FIWARE platform. But they, regardless of the technology that they had, each city had different challenges, and they wanted to specify locally what they wanted to do and how they wanted to demonstrate the use case. That's why all this process came through different phases, and we ended up creating different atomic services, which allowed every city to basically have the function standardized and solvable. And that's one of the things that came out as a good opportunity from Synchronicity to test the minimum interoperability mechanisms from open and agile smart cities. So basically, these atomic services are used to build application services that can be easily replicated in the different cities and reach the large scale that the project envisioned. They are functional blocks, so they specifically do only one thing, but are a bit more complex than just a simple function. And this usage is encouraged, but it's not mandatory. I mean, you don't have to push all the atomic services or push these functionalities to a new city that joins the ecosystem or so on. But some examples could be a routing service giving two coordinate couples give the best route, a traffic flow estimator predicting traffic flows given the historical, dashboards, visualizers, loading GTFS information into from FIWARE and into the trip planner, GTFS real-time loader from NGSI. I know these are some acronyms, but I'll explain them a little bit further, because I wanted to show exactly what we, as a technical partner of the city of Porto, have been doing in the project. And the city actually reached us and said, okay, we want to solve the multimodal challenge, and we know that we have the platform in place, but we want to provide our citizens and transportation users a nice interface, because we have already some systems in place. We have already some journey planners available, but they don't match the expectations that the community seeks. And we know that Helsinki is developing the DigiTransit, which is an open source journey planning solution that combines several components into basically a modern, highly available route planning service, which can run on a mobile device and web site, a web browser, sorry, and basically provide the planning algorithms provided by OpenTreePlanner. So basically, DigiTransit is a white label application with some added services on top of OpenTreePlanner. So it's basically one component built with React, a JavaScript framework for building user interfaces, following this client-side web application architecture, and they use basically different components to fetch either the service from OpenTreePlanner, so the routing API, which supports now GraphQL, and then it requires specific frameworks from JavaScript to comply with it, but also others that fetch the real-time updates and the geocoding service and the maps and the tiles, and makes it very, very efficient and robust on the end user's service. So the city basically challenged us to develop a comprehensive journey planner, which would fetch different data sources, which would be static, so they wouldn't change quite often, and the dynamic ones, which would change whenever it happens. So basically, they wanted to integrate the transportation network, so the schedules, which are typically for the OpenTree Planner are specified in GTFS, which is the standard from Google, which became the de facto standard actually. The general transit feed specification, which basically says the schedules of the road net, the public transportation network, where the stops are, the routes, and so on, the ticketing and pricing. But also they wanted that the system would support other services that could be available in the city, but it could also then be added up in a later phase, like the vehicle sharing systems supporting docking for bike sharing and scooters and whatever, but also parking locations, their status, and the vehicle availability. Not only that, but they wanted to also see if people could easily find their routes to specific points of interest or for specific touristic events. So they wanted that the interface would also be fed with that touristic information from the FIWARE platform that was in place, and also other dynamic data from the future that wanted to correlate the impact of the transportation with environmental conditions, the weather forecast, measuring traffic flow and how the constraints impact the usage of the public transportation, and also other geographical data, which is required for the route planning to work. So basically this Porto multimodal assistant is an application built with the DC Transit platform, and basically it's OpenTree Planner in the backend. So OpenTree Planner, as I mentioned last week, is a great solution for general route planning, but in order to provide this top-notch journey planning, other components like the mobile-friendly user interface, which has been worked on by the Helsinki team, is very, very nice, as I'll show you. The map tile serving, geocoding to search for addresses and translate them to coordinates and so on. Several tools are needed to be assembled just for this specific service. And DC Transit platform provided those tools, as I'll show you in the next figure, which basically depicts the matching layers between the overall architecture of Porto's synchronicity framework and then the application on top. So I know this is a bit. This was basically all the images that I'm showing have been taken from the deliverables, the reports that the project has produced. So most of this information is online, even if you don't follow all of the ideas I'm saying. You can then later on look it up on the website and on the documentation produced. In any case, if we go bottom up, the layers are the following. So the bigger square, the blue square, which involves synchronicity platform and the IoT layer, we mentioned there are FIWARE components because this is the specific case for Porto, whose platform is basically based on FIWARE. But other cities do not have FIWARE in place, and the concept should work on the same way, as long as the northbound interface and the southbound interfaces would follow the minimal interoperability points. So this bottom blue rectangle is basically the data sources for the services that support the application, the Porto synchronicity infrastructure, namely the FIWARE component, sensors, and other city databases. And on the middle, the green one called services and backend is basically the support services, which require a bit of conversion from what's available on the city and then to be used by the application, because the DigiTransit application and OpenTree Planner are not FIWARE compliant, and they have already in place well-tested and robust interfaces and services that work on the way they were basically conceptualized. And the idea here was not to reinvent the wheel and do something and change what was already well done in place. So we adapted what we had from FIWARE to work with OpenTree Planner on the top red rectangle. Basically the application layer where the multimodal transportation works. So if you see on the right side, you'll see the details of the DigiTransit services. So the user interface is the React thing that I mentioned. Basically fetches the API for routing, basically the service that is meant to be used to plan the best routes using different means of transportation and from different points to different points. It uses the geocoding to translate addresses to coordinates, the map tiles, and the real-time server that basically gets updates from vehicle positioning, delays, and so on. All of this powered beforehand by the synchronicity framework. So as you can see, this is some screenshots from the DigiTransit user interface working in the city of Porto. So we basically customized it to look alike the image and the brand guidelines from the city, and you basically can from its interface decide what sort of transportation you are traveling by. Basically browse for points of interest across the city and actually filter which information you want to see on the map. So if you actually request the trip planning that you want to plan a route from a specific point, like this point of interest, you can select and it will start giving you the bus stops or metro stops or train stops that are close by, and the next stop times that the routes will pass there, and you can actually then use the geocoder to search for a destination, for example. So if you start looking for a specific point of interest, it will autocomplete and give you different possibilities. In this case, I was searching for the major football stadium, and when I enter it, it will basically provide me the different transportation possibilities to go from one place to another, and I can then further customize it accordingly to my preferred needs. All of this in a responsive interface, meaning that this could be easily accessible through my smartphone and my smaller device screen, and I can also show you, but in case the service is available and accessible, so feel free to test it. If you have any questions or suggestions of points of interest in Porto, I can try to help. But in general, this is it. So how does this thing actually integrated with FIWARE and the synchronicity framework? Basically, as you might recall, we had the NGSI interfaces northbound on top of the synchronicity platform, and basically we had different components fetching information and providing services to DigiTransit. So GeoCoder is a service based on Values, an open source tool, which basically it works as it is off the shelf. So it provides a way to perform address searches and address lookups, also known as reverse geocoding. And internally, it uses an Elasticsearch tool for fast index and search in a NoSQL structure. So it's quite fast searching for text. The user data handler is a service based on Firebase, a well-known Google mobile platform that helps quickly develop applications, and it's used for managing and handling user authentication, storage of user data, and so on. And basically, it also calculates some metrics for user management. And then you have the main service, so the OpenStreetPlanner, which basically collects information from OpenStreetMaps, from what we call here the external system, so data that is provided by an external entity. And we have two atomic services which were developed to fetch information, access resource and context management APIs, and provide them to OpenStreetPlanner. So the GTFS fetcher basically extracts data from a transit feed file, which is published in the Orion context broker. So basically, we could use the broker to update this fetcher whenever the GTFS source has been updated. So the agency provides a new feed file with new schedules for August because it's summer holidays, so the schedules are not the same, and the fetcher would then be notified that it should update the schedules and relaunch and do all the calculation again for the OpenStreetPlanner. The GTFS real-time loader is something that could actually benefit very well from the real-time capabilities from Orion, from Context Broker, and basically whenever the arrival estimation or trip updates or occurrences would be pushed, it basically translates it to GTFS real-time and feeds OpenStreetPlanner, meaning that people will then, on the DigiTransit user interface, be notified of delays, problems with their expected route, and so on. And the routing service, well, it's what it is. It's OpenTree It's basically combining all of this information and giving you an interface to plan between 2 points and according to your preference as a user. As promised, and I don't want to bother anymore, Synchronicity website has a tech section which provides guidelines and introduction to all of these concepts. Where are the Docker files, the open source code, how are things structured, what does everything do? On the media side, we'll have the, well, besides media and news, we also have the deliverables and documentation produced officially for the European Commission. So if you want to see how the architecture was defined and what every city or the cities were requesting in the different challenges and how they implemented things, that's where you'll find it. The open source code is on GitLab, not GitHub, gitlab.com. We have all the technology produced on the project. We have the API specified and basically they can be tested in API, which is pretty cool, and plenty of Docker images ready to deploy also in Docker Hub. DigiTransit is a solution produced in Helsinki. So you have the source there if you want to get in contact. It's also open source, so they have their own repository and they have things that we use to customize it for the city of Porto. The Porto routing planner and Ubiwhere's website. If you want to know anything else about Synchronicity or other solutions, I'll be happy to know. That's my presentation. Thanks so much. So feel free to ask any questions that you have. I'll try to help.
So I'll be happy to start here. A really good presentation. Thank you. Really very, very helpful, very clear. Is Ubiwhere deploying a service in Porto at the moment? I mean, is there a production service using this platform in Porto at the moment?
Yes, yes. This one basically, I can actually. I don't know if you're still seeing my screen. If you're seeing now the DigiTransit user interface.
Yeah.
This is the production instance. So it's fetching data from the framework we've assembled with the city, and it's basically querying for the points of interest, the transit schedules, and so on. I don't know why this is a bit different. That should be. Okay. I had a cached version, which was not the correct one. So there you go. So now you can see the different points of interest, and basically this information is openly available in NGSI for other applications to develop. So this is not just limited for the routing service, meaning that the platform and the framework have different data, which is used here, but could also be used for other applications, aligning with the strategy and the vision of the city. So I can also showcase the geocoding thing. You know, I can find some nice restaurant. How's it called? The one with the Francesinhas, Santiago. So we can search for a very nice restaurant in Porto. And yeah, as live demos should work, they're not working well. Nice. Okay. So yeah, nice. Well done, Ricardo. So I can try to see what is going wrongly here. Francisco might need to check as well. Probably it's not finding the geocoder is not finding the correct point of interest in any case. We basically can search for specific points, and as I mentioned beforehand, I can actually put in this one. So basically, this is the live instance, Wilfred. So this is what the city has available for the open call pilots to use, third-party developers, and actually provide it to the citizens as the service for route planning. So you can have different transportation modes. This is not a very sexy route. Let's see here. So you'll have a different route given your type of preferred means of transportation, and consider the current times and the current availability of the public transportation. So you can see the different schedules and timetables. If you already know which place you want to take, you can see the next bus lines or metro lines that will pass by. But you can also see in the timetable, see which sort of route passed by, see the different, this is typical functionalities from OpenTripPlanners, but I believe in a nicely crafted user interface, well done by Helsinki, so this is quite nice. So I don't know if you have any questions.
This is very, very good. I think at the beginning you talked about the being a way to integrate things like commercial operated scooters and those kind of things. Have you started down that road? Are you talking to any of the sort of commercial suppliers of last mile transit about how to integrate their services?
We know that technically it's easy to do so, because we've already tested it out with our own. A couple of years ago, we tested the OpenTripPlanner with our own bike sharing system. So we could basically integrate easily if you provide your service through a specific norm, a specific API. So technically, it's quite easy to do so. In Porto, there aren't. I'm not sure if they have already any new bike sharing system, but the idea is to actually engage them. But it's part of the city policy to do so, or the city strategy. So on our side, we'll be able to handle technical integration, but it's up to them to do the.
Yeah, it's not so much a technical question as a a matter of the city finding the partners. So not really up to us at Ubiwhere, right?
But yeah, exactly. But I think that the providers are willing to do so, because, for instance, for the Lime scooters, we have them in our hometown, Coimbra, and they basically, when the city installed them, they demanded that they would be limited in certain areas, geofenced areas. They should be limited in at a specific speed, and the other demand was that they would provide the aggregated usage data of the scooters in a longer term, meaning that the city wanted to know exactly where were people traveling by. I don't know if I'm making sense, so that they could then invest in bike lanes and improving the paths on those, and try to see if the urban planning would make effect after seeing how people would travel around all across our hometown. So I see that if the entities are willing to share that data as an exchange of being allowed to deploy there, I don't see why they wouldn't be able to publicize their services in a service like this one for route planning. So I'm quite optimistic on that.
Yeah, no, I think we're in a similar position here, and certainly this maps well. Do you have people using this? I mean, at the moment in this state, it's very similar. The functionality at this level is very similar to that in Google Maps today, and so persuading people to move prior to getting some of those other services in it is probably a bit of an uphill battle, right? That we have, this needs to exist at this level, so as you can take the next step and start to roll in some of the commercial services, car-to-go, scooters, and other things. Have you started to see an uptake, and who's using it, as opposed to staying just within Google Maps?
Yeah, as part of the Synchronicity project, we know that there are specific partners working on evaluating the impact and validating the usage of the services and the tools with actual citizens and so on. So at the moment, we have two parallel activities. We have the partners of the project, including the city of Porto, testing this out with specific end users and validating that this matches what they expect. And also we call it an open call. So we had basically cascade funding, meaning that the project funded third parties to develop solutions on top of the framework. So we have other third-party startups and SMEs developing other solutions. So I know that at least there's one which is relevant for this information, which basically their solution is mapping roads and streets on the city which are handicap accessible, and evaluating them all across the city, which is information which is very relevant for the decision makers and the urban planners. So it's something that they are doing with funding from Synchronicity. They won the open call, as we call it. So I don't know exactly how many people are actually using it at the moment. I know there are these two initiatives ongoing, so I know there are people who are becoming more and more aware of it. But I can check out with the city and try to see in detail how many people are actually aware of this solution, and how are they using it as of right now.
I'm dominating the questions here. Other questions?
Go ahead.
Does anybody have any other questions? What do you see as what you do at the end of the year, right? So as you say, the Synchronicity project is coming to a close. Are you moving towards a product for Ubiwhere, or how do you see? Is it the things just stop at the end of the year? Where do you see it going?
No, this has been quite a long path. So the framework that's now feeding this application. So this is an actual application that people could use, benefiting from open data and open APIs that the city has been investing. But we have been working with them since 2015, and we helped them set up before the context broker, and we've published some information there. Then they used it in a Hackacity event, which is a hackathon that happens every year, and they use it to test and create some applications on top. And this has been evolving, and now what Synchronicity allowed was to, have people sitting around at the table, discuss different perspectives, different points of view, different requirements and challenges, evolving the platform, or the framework, as you want to call it, and create these applications on top. So I don't think this will stop this year. As an end user or as an application provider, I know that this is hard to compete with Google Maps or other players who are solely focused on this sort of solutions. But we know that the insights we get from helping the city setting this up, harmonizing the data, investing in robust and scalable architecture, and having this success story with the city of Porto, I think it's good publicity for both, for the city and for us as well as the technical provider. So in the end of the day, I think that's what we can get the most out of it, meaning that we can easily replicate this through other cities and help them in the ecosystem. But the main challenge, I would say, is actually creating the awareness of the added value of opening up the data and the APIs, because some service providers are still a bit not very willing to do so, and some people don't see the added value of having open data, because up until now it was just a dump of unstructured information in proprietary formats, and no one would actually benefit from that. But if you have open data that's telling you where your bus is, or if it's delayed or not, that's useful information. And I think those are the sort of things that we will want to go next and engage more and more on this framework with richer and more complete real-time and valuable information.
Got you. Got you. Other questions?
If not, if you're feeling shy, or if you didn't have the chance, or they didn't come up, if it comes up later on, feel free to reach us by email, or write us a line, and we try to help as best as we can. So.
Yeah, I would certainly like to follow up, Ricardo, and I will. I think the framing here is really interesting. I know you you had some conversations with I think with FIWARE, maybe Atos as well, about doing something in the US, and I would be very interested. I think this fits very well with some ideas we have too. So so if you're interested in participating, you know, I'm quite happy to put some work into getting a group together at our end. So I'll be in touch with you about that. And if anybody else is interested, please get in touch. I think there are opportunities. I think it's a very interesting base platform. You are using the context broker, right? And where does it play a role?
Let me get back to this. Yeah. Hold on. So basically, the context broker gives us this context management APIs on the northbound. So applications can get access to NGSI compliant APIs with real-time data, and also here on the southbound, fetching information from different city resources and IoT devices. So we will have the NGSI API on two layers, on two sides.
That may go partway to answering the question I was asking earlier about individual data, about having your own persona, right? So if in my data file it lists me as, you know, whatever, disabled or whatever, then that could be brought in through the context broker to help plan a trip without asking me a lot of questions. Right, that if my personal information is queryable to customize the trip, the context broker would be the mechanism to do that. Is that the right way of thinking about it?
I would say so, because on the roadmap for context broker and for the NGSI, actually, there's this work being done by ETSI, the European Telecommunication Standards Institute, which is has basically launched earlier this year the NGSI LD, LD standing for linked data, which provides a specification for semantic interoperability, giving you an extra layer that the context broker as of right now cannot provide. So the FIWARE Foundation, Ubiwhere, NEC, and other players are working on this specification, and there's already an open source implementation, the first version of a broker that's compliant with NGSI LD, which one of the architecture possibilities is actually the one that's federated, meaning that you could then easily get this context exchange between different platforms, and it would allow to easily, at least in theory, that transition between instances or locations. So I think it's on the roadmap, and soon enough we'll be able to test it on the field, but it's something that's not, let's call it production ready. I don't know, Francisco, if you want to add anything else.
I think, well, your answer is a bit more related to the federation side of things. But regarding your question specifically about I think it's just a matter of having that sort of information. So telling us if you're someone with mobility problems or whatever conditions, and then that data can be used to for instance, to feed the Open Trip Planner and say, okay, you have to use a specific route or something like that.
Gotcha. No, that's excellent.
Good.
I think I got all my questions answered. Then, if anybody else has a question, speak now. And otherwise, I think we can wrap it up. Well, thanks, Ricardo. This was really very, very helpful at short notice. So thanks a lot.
Thank you for the opportunity and availability. Yeah.
Thank you. This was great. Hiroki, I think we're on for a presentation from you next week, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Great. Okay, I look forward to that too. So thanks everyone. We'll wrap it up at this point. Talk to you next week, and I will get the audio of this published very shortly.
Thank you, and thank you, Hiroki, for changing the agenda. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a
Bye.
nice summer. Bye-bye.